Wittstock Heath in the northwest of Brandenburg. These deserted buildings served military purposes not so long ago. Behind the dead windows, there was life. Plans were made and strategies developed. The different building styles suggest a checkered history. The first barracks and service buildings were erected here in the 1930s for the German Wehrmacht army. Hitler's Admiral Canaris is said to have resided here for a period of time. In 1945, units of the Soviet Army moved in. In 1945, the Second World War has ended. The division of Germany had been decided upon at the conferences of Yalta and Potsdam. 4 occupation zones came into being. East Germany was occupied by Soviet troops, and Wittstock once more became a garrison town. Upon the foundation of the German Democratic Republic on the 7th of October 1949, the occupation formally ends. However, the agreement on the relations between the GDR and the USSR, dated 20th of September 1955, seals the further stay of Soviet troops on the territory of the GDR. The occupation was to last for 49 years and 8 months. Wittstock in the winter of 1990. The Supreme Command of the Western Group of the Soviet Army has issued us with an approval to document the everyday life of a unit stationed in Germany. In the GDR, everyone believed to know the Russians. The Cyrillic letters S and A stood for Sovetskaya Armia. The man in the street read them as Circus Alyosha. Officially, one referred to them as brothers in class and brothers in arms in those days. But who really knows the people who are behind such labels? They lived as strangers in a strange country for 45 years, isolated behind walls and fences. Now we're on our way to them. The approval for filming was issued by Army General Boris Snetkov. Meanwhile, the 4-star general has been replaced. Will his word still be good? The piloting vehicle stops a few meters from the gate. Major Vasily Mikhailovich Tolmachov will accompany us over the next few days and help us to find our way around the maze of the fighter squadron. The military premises are 410 hectares in size. This is where some 6,000 people live and work. Soldiers, officers and civilian employees. Usually, only married officers with a family live in a self-contained dwelling. There were also some GDR citizens who worked here. The commander of the squadron, Colonel Yuri Viktorovich Komisarov, is expecting us.
Здравствуйте, товарищи.
The 38-year-old, who hails from the Ukraine, took over the command only a few weeks ago. The unit does not have the best working and living conditions. The premises are like a grey sack, he says.
Да.
Outside, the little town has meanwhile come to life. Military vehicles are picking their way through narrow streets. Women are taking their babies to the creche and children are making their way to school. It's like everywhere else, only that most men wear uniforms. Meanwhile, the runways, the taxiways and the marshalling areas are being cleared of snow and ice. This is the main prerequisite for a smooth flight operation at this time of year. A converted jet engine is rendering an invaluable service. The weather station is indispensable for flight operation. A weather forecast is just coming in from Offenbach. the head of the meteorological service, Captain Gennady Borisovich Klishov, I analyzed the general weather conditions for the location of our squadron. And what is the forecast? We'll have flying weather in general, but there could be complications due to the sleet. This would be dangerous for our pilots. They would have to interrupt the flying operation.
Это очень опасно. А в принципе, метеоусловия будут позволять.
After treating the weather chart with an iron, the water areas are colored in, and the isobars are entered, all of it manually. Then air traffic control is briefed via voice radio.
200 метров, видимость 8 километров, давление.
Meanwhile, outside, the mail plane is landing, an AN-26. Every day, this is how letters and newspapers arrive in Wittstock from the faraway home. At the mailroom, we meet the postman of the squadron. Soldier Kirill Ivanovich Pakhomov is sorting letters, postcards and newspapers and is distributing them to the respective departments. Of course, before he goes about his official tasks, he reads his own mail first. Today, his father has written to him. He is 19 years old and comes from Tuberta, a spa town in the north of the Caucasus. He tells us about home, and he becomes passionate. Even Americans and many Germans are holidaying there. It's such a beautiful place. And what about leave for him? No, he never had one. He would have been satisfied already if he could have visited his older brother, who's performing his military service in Wismar on the Baltic Sea coast, not even 200 kilometers from here. Away from the barracks, the tower and runways, between the protective bunkers, fuel, weapons and other materials, the commander expects us at the door to air traffic control. When the fighter jets are up in the air, the heart of the squadron beats here in the nuclear bomb-proof bunker. This is where flight operations are monitored from. We're just in time for the daily briefing of the crews. On the walls, there are not only maps and lists of tactical data and technical parameters, but also pictures of the main fighter planes which we used in the meanwhile dissolved Warsaw Pact. And there are the aircraft of the enemy too. The meteorologist on duty explains the situation in the area of operations for the squadron with the help of weather data and maps. He points out the complicated weather conditions. That's why the squadron commander orders an extra weather flight. The aim is to establish the bottom and the top of the clouds, the cloud layers, penetration conditions and any danger of freezing. Are there any questions? None? Dismissed. Last preparations on the runway. In a wide row, the soldiers walk along the runways in order to pick up stones and other items that could become dangerous for the jet engines during takeoff and landing. Mobile lights are driven into position to provide additional visual markings on the airstrip. Of course, the fire service is also at the ready. Altogether, the squadron has 8 MiG-23s and a maximum of 39 MiG-29s. The first flight of a MiG-29 took place on the 6th of October 1977. They were put into service in 1983. The Soviet Union had this jet designed primarily as an effective countermeasure to the Western F-15 and F-16 fighter jets. The result was an extremely agile aircraft which was superior to many Western fighter jets in this respect. Over the course of the years, many variants were built and tested. Preparations at the tower. The radar displays are being checked and adjusted. The transmission of data from the radar stations at and outside the airfield have to work smoothly, as the pilots have to rely on these instructions of the air traffic controllers, especially for the landing approach. They're still relatively quiet. We use it for an interview with the head of air traffic control, Captain Alexander Erikovich Grigoriev. His parents belonged to the Volga Germans, who were banned to Siberia in 1941 at the orders of Stalin. Today, the 32-year-old captain, his wife and his 2 sons live in Orenburg near the Ural Mountains. He was not allowed to move into an apartment in the European part of the Soviet Union. Of course, he's heard of the fact that the German government has made available 7.8 billion Deutschmarks to the Western group of the Soviet army for housing construction back home. But will there be a chance for him to get an apartment? No, I don't believe so. I fear that the money will be used to build homes for the higher ranks. The likes of us will be left empty-handed as usual. Outside, the preparations are nearly completed. Most of the aircraft are ready for takeoff. Some of the engine parameters are to be checked before the flight in this MiG-29. That's why a technician is sitting in the pilot's seat. Meanwhile, the weather aircraft, a MiG-23, is rolling to the takeoff point. In this case, filler up means 4,000 liters. This is clean filling in order to keep the environmental pollution as low as possible. Time for a look into the cockpit. A confusing number of switches, relays and onboard instruments. A pilot who masters them can fly this interceptor at a maximum speed of 2.35 Mach. The gigantic engines are also very impressive. All clear for the weather plane. The experienced pilot has the orders to check the predicted range of sight, the bottom and the top of the clouds, as well as the radio and light signals. His report will decide finally on whether flying is possible today or not. Apart from the flying operation, the pilots are also trained in theory, especially the tactics and strategy of combat action. But political education has an important role to play too, as the pictures and slogans on the walls suggests. Today, however, the subject of instruction is the takeoff and landing of the MiG-29. In the discussion, the influence of wind and clouds, of rain and snow is analyzed, as well as the respective flying reactions. Regular flying has started. The first MiGs taxi to the runway. Thanks to its special wing design, the MiG-29 achieves very good ascending forces. The same is true for its slow-flying properties. Under field conditions, the aircraft is able to take off and land on unpaved strips. That's why it's suitable for the most varied tactical tasks. The boss of the squadron, Colonel Komisarov, is an active pilot too. He knows that he can rely on his ground crew, men who look after the technology, who maintain and check the aircraft. Still, The last round of inspection is up to the pilot. The weaponry of the MiG-29 is extremely variable. There are up to 6 underwing fuselage stations that carry missiles or bombs for the most varied tactical tasks. And there's a 30mm cannon on board. The 3-kilometer runway is wide enough to permit a staggered takeoff for 2 fighter jets at a time. This too is practiced, as the aircraft are airborne faster that way in case of an emergency. The older models of the MiG-23 type also take off for training flights. They've not been written off yet. Thanks to the different flying properties and the weaponry of the 2 aircraft, they can take over very special tactical tasks. The MiG-23 as a fighter bomber is able to reach also distant targets, with the optimal tilting wings designed for high speeds. In contrast, the MiG-29, as an agile interceptor, was designed for the short range. At the tower, we discover another Russian speciality, the abacus calculating machine. It's called Shchoti in Russia and can cope with the 4 basic arithmetic operations. Even in the age of electronics, the flying hours and fuel consumption can be calculated exactly. Then the Antonov AN-2 type courier aircraft lands. The largest double-decker of the world looks like a relic of the 1930s. But even half a century after its maiden flight, the AN-2 is still a safe, all-purpose aircraft. In contrast to the airfield surveillance radar and the runway monitoring radar, there's a radar station for wider-ranging air traffic control located on a hill outside the airfield. A small outpost from which the data and radar images are transmitted to air traffic control at the tower and to the underground command post. Just a few stone throws away from their fathers, the children are learning. The 93rd Middle School has 11 forms, each of them with some 30 pupils. This requires teaching in 2 shifts. We meet the 4th form doing handicrafts. However, our film team is, of course, much more interesting. The former compulsory school uniform is worn only by very few nowadays. The teacher, who's not strict at all, praises her pupils. They're preparing for carnival. Outside, soldiers are marching to their lunch. The song they're singing speaks of a sandy poplar tree path where their girlfriend is waiting. Also in the dining hall, the categorical imperative rules supreme. The sign on the wall says, "Soldiers, treat their dishes with care and rinse them. It's forbidden to remove any dishes from the dining hall." The food is simple but ample. Nobody will go hungry. One for all? No, not one spoon for all, but one has the spoons for all, the person on kitchen duty. And above everything, Mother Russia, a piece of home so far away. After lunch, everyone has to hand back the spoon. Outside, we meet a young dad. Was the child born here? Boy or girl? A girl. When was she born? On the 6th of December? Then she's not even 2 weeks old. And what's her full name? Second-hand cars, Mercedes, BMW, Opel and Audi. Viktor Lakdionov bought his Talbot yesterday for 1,900 Deutschmarks. Soon he'll start out on the journey to Donetsk, 3,000 kilometers from here. So why didn't he buy a Lada, if only for the spare parts? I've been a driver for 20 years now. I can repair all of this metalwork myself. There's nothing I couldn't do. And then he shows us a spare tank. It comes from a lorry, 260 liters worth. Well, have a safe journey. We're at the Flight Training Center. Even the troops stationed in Germany feel the economic squeeze by their government. The sparse fuel contingent permits fewer and fewer training flights. More and more, the flight simulator has to serve this purpose. All kinds of flight situations and conditions can be practiced here without endangering man or aircraft. The trainer is able to observe the reactions of a student, talk to him, and analyze the training later on. Captain Gitai Gorotsky is undergoing takeoff and landing training. We asked the Class 3 pilot whether the job of a fighter pilot makes sense at all nowadays. Yes, well, what sense?
Смысл, конечно, есть в этой работе.
First and foremost, it's always an honorable job to maintain peace in the skies above us, for our country.
То есть мирное небо над нами. Ну, сейчас, конечно.
Sure, at the moment, there are no big problems, because the international climate has improved. Still, it remains work that has to be done.
Но все равно я считаю, что эта работа нужна будет.
There's economizing also elsewhere. Polina Pachonchik starts her shift at the boiler house. Every day, the 28-year-old wife of an ensign has to move dozens of tons of soft coal. Why is she doing this hard work? There used to be soldiers to do it, but at the moment, there are many missing. There are not enough being drafted. That's why we women have to help out. The work has to be done, and we don't do it for nothing. I get a monthly 500 Deutschmarks, and I can make a few wishes of our kids come true with it. We thank her and wish her all the best. This is the room for the crews on call. On duty for 24 hours, they're waiting for their orders. A mission against whom? Captain Alexei Grankin lives in a comfortable 3-room flat with his wife, daughter and son. He likes it in Germany, even though he has no German friends. Where does he see the enemy? Enemies? We don't have any enemies, not here. They like us here. Still, we're soldiers and far from home. We have to be ready in any case. Alarm. In an emergency, every minute counts. But what emergency should the pilots and technicians imagine in the reunified Germany? Today, nearly 30 countries own MiG-29s. On all parts of the globe, except for Australia, fighter pilots are trained in these aircraft. Even the US Air Force has some MiG-29s, which take over the role of the aggressor in maneuvers in order to simulate air battles better. The German Bundeswehr army had taken over 24 MiG-29As from the National People's Army of the GDR. One jet was lost due to a crash. The remaining 23 aircraft were handed over to the Polish Air Force for the symbolic price of €1 per piece in 2003. There's only one jet that wasn't sold. It's to be seen at the Federal Air Force Museum of Berlin-Gatow today. The alarm exercise is completed. None of the MiGs took off today. As pointed out earlier, money needs to be saved. The times when more or less the entire squadron was airborne are long past. We asked Captain Grankin whether it's true that he behaved heroically during a flying exercise a few months ago. Well, that's no doubt exaggerated. I'm no hero. The story you mean was the following. During the flight, my aircraft flew at a very high speed and an engine suddenly failed. There was no prior warning of the breakdown at all, so I had two possibilities, either to attempt to land the aircraft or to trigger the ejection seat. I decided to land the aircraft. Of course, it was complicated under these conditions. The high speed, the limited range of action, the overload of the engine and the fuselage. But I was able to bring the jet down without any damage. Wasn't there any danger? The danger of crashing? Of course, the landing was life-threatening for me. I could have crashed, but you don't think of that. You just don't have the time. I just knew one thing. You have to land. You have to bring down the jet in one piece. Yes, and I didn't want to injure your people, your soil. That's what it was. That's all. On the way to the gym, there's a Soviet star above us. There's always some action inside. For most of the people here, compulsory sports is not enough. Today, the older members of the squadron have challenged the younger pilots for a return match of volleyball. The commander backs up the senior team, which makes no big impression on the opponents, however. At the end, the young ones score a victory again. Passing the portraits of the best and the photos of all the commanders who led the squadron since its foundation, one reaches the officers' mess. There's pleasure of a different nature waiting for the visitor here. Thanks to German unity, the rather sparse cultural offer has been broadened by a new attraction, a gambling hall. Well, maybe calling it a gambling hall is exaggerated. Actually, these are some decommissioned gambling machines from Berlin. A clever young man has bought them and set them up here. The ordinary soldier receives 25 Deutschmarks pay a month. Not much one can do with it. However, there's always a winner, the owner. At the mini supermarket, there's a constant coming and going. The prices are fair. The offer is similar to the shops in Wittstock. Officers' wives and soldiers have quickly gotten used to the new currency. The trained shop assistant hails from Lvov and has been living in Germany for 3 years now. In 1991, she'll return home. The news from home makes her anxious. Meat is supposedly only to be gotten on the black market, more or less unaffordable for the normal people. Will she be able to work in her job at all? The kindergarten is open every day from 6 in the morning to 6 in the evening. Care and supplies for the children are free of charge. When one of the kindergarten teachers is sick or on leave, there are enough officers' wives who can step in. The new times have arrived even at this kindergarten. If you're looking for proof, here it is. After lunch, there's a 90-minute rest. This applies to everyone without exception. They're all with the military somehow, and the spick and span beds are lined in their respective order. Just like at all kindergartens around the world, the games have something to do with a dream job. I want to become a dentist. A dentist, great. And you, my boy, what do you want to become? A footballer. And the little ones prove to us that we are in Germany. Slowly, the day is drawing to its close. On the airfield, there's still intense activity. Fighter jets take off and land in short succession. Even though the MiG-29 is going to celebrate its 30th birthday soon, it's still being built. From the very outset, it had been envisaged as a serious production. Even today, people are working on its improvement and modernization. Since the end of the 1970s, a great number of different model versions have been created.
Д-67 посадка, ветер справа под 30, попутный 2-3 метра.
More than 4,000 MiG-23s of the most varied types were built in the Soviet Union. Counting in their licensed production, altogether some 11,000 MiG-23s have been produced worldwide. In the Soviet Union, the last of their type were manufactured in 1978. The MiG-29 is a true multi-purpose fighter jet today. There's even a version suitable for the use on an aircraft carrier. Upon nightfall, the last aircraft complete their training flights. The onboard lights penetrate the surging mist. Over the past months, the general flying conditions have changed dramatically. Just like for the Bundeswehr, the following rule applies: no supersonic flights at all, and a ban on flights during the night or at weekends. End of shift, at long last, out of the suit and under the shower. Finishing time also for Captain Ivan Viktorovich Kvasnikov. The 25-year-old pilot was transferred to Germany after his university training and has been living here for 4 years now. His 1-year younger wife Lena, she works at the tower for a monthly pay of 350 Deutschmarks, is already waiting for him. The TV is on in the living room. The Russian news magazine Vremya broadcasts the latest information from the faraway home. So how do the Kvasnikovs assess the economic and political situation at home? This is a more pleasant life than in the Soviet Union. When you hear the reports from home, or see it when you're on leave, how our people are faring, it makes you ponder.
Это жизнь, которая связана с нашей работой, вот именно с моей работой, потому что она...
I mustn't think of the insecurity and the lack of accommodation when I fly. But this is my job, and now she's working here too.
И та жизнь, которая...
The people at home work just as hard, and still they lead a worse life.
Там, конечно, намного хуже живут.
What do the two wish for the future? Not much. I would wish for a comfortable apartment, 2 kids, and a good job at home.
Жена. Как раз. Да. У меня мечта стать пилотом.
My dream? I would like to continue to fly, if at all possible, to become a Class 1 pilot. How shall I explain it to you? When I fly, I'm alone up there in my cabin. It's tight, and you can't really say it's very comfortable. But there are the skies and the clouds. That's romanticism for me. A little bit of romanticism. The soldiers' quarters are less romantic. There are 56 of them sleeping in this hall. Their call of duty runs for 2 years. Their monthly pay amounts to 25 Deutschmarks. The young men don't get any leave, and they're not allowed to wear civilian clothes. The duty is tough. Still, the soldiers serving with the Air Force are much better off than the infantrymen, and in comparison to a military unit in the Soviet Union, this is pure relaxation. The soldiers are only allowed to read the letters from home once or twice, then they have to destroy them. After the withdrawal of the Russians from Germany, letters were found in many barracks, stashed behind cladding or hidden in cupboards. One last time, we've arranged a meeting with Commander Komisarov. How does he assess his personal situation and that of the army, in which he's serving during these times of change?
Мы сейчас находимся, так сказать, на территории суверенного государства.
We're on the territory of a sovereign state. This is a totally different defense situation. But first and foremost, we're soldiers and serve where we're put.
Тем не менее, мы военные люди. Мы сейчас здесь. Завтра будем в другом месте.
The general situation in the world is complicated. Our government is not in an easy position either. Fortunately, the picture of the enemy has meanwhile changed, a process that can be observed for 2 years already.
С временами не так далеко.
Still, we have to maintain combat readiness. The soldier has to fulfill the tasks set by the government. Nothing has changed there. Orders have to be followed.
Указом правительства. Потом мы выполняем приказы правительства. Исходя из этого, извините.
However, at the moment, the commander has other things on his mind than fulfilling his combat mission. Now, after the reunification of Germany, he has to prepare the 33rd Fighter Squadron for its return to the Soviet Union. On the wall, the fighting trail of the squadron during the Second World War, a long path full of losses. The withdrawal to the home country may be a journey with an unsure outcome, to a country facing great changes.
Ну, по нашему выводу отсюда сначала.
Other people decide about our withdrawal. In other words, we don't know any details yet. At the moment, we're putting together a team for the recultivation of the premises. The members come from all parts of the garrison. They're to put in order the entire premises. This applies both to the buildings as well as any concrete structures.
Ну, то есть у нас вот здесь было строительство, вот за полосой в прошлом году только закончили.
We're leaving a lot of scrap metal behind. It has to be collected at a central point, transported by rail, and handed over to a scrapping company.
Значит, этот металлолом будет свозиться в одно место.
And teams have also been assembled by the individual units to clean up the buildings, the offices, and the living quarters. We want to contribute to fulfilling the agreements reached by our two governments. These are the main things we're working on at the moment.
И я думаю, что порядок в целом будет.
Changing of the guards. It won't be long anymore and the soldiers will start the last duty. They'll unload their guns and take the bayonets off for the very last time. One of the pilots tells us, there's no nation in the world that can tolerate foreign troops on their soil in the long term. After all, every nation wants to be free. This is why our withdrawal is a good thing. I'll leave Germany with a clear conscience. On the 30th of May 1994, the 33rd Fighter Squadron takes off for the very last time in Wittstock to fly back home. 3 months later, the last Russian soldier leaves the Federal Republic of Germany.